Bom, então isso é o sinal do início oficial. Nós estamos aqui na quinta mesa desse simpósio. A mesa, o título é Inteligência Artificial, Experiências Imersivas e Religião. Leigo e burro, como eu sou, precisava inteligência artificial para saber o que significa experiências imersivas. Vocês sabem? Não fingem. Eu vou ler para vocês. Experiências imersivas são aquelas em que a pessoa entre em um ambiente digital ou híbrido de modo tão envolvente que a sensação é de presença real dentro daquele espaço. Não é apenas assistir ou usar tecnologia, mas estar dentro dela. Então, isso é também uma mensagem para os ouvintes fora daqui. Espero que eles possam fazer uma boa experiência imersiva pela transmissão. E nós vamos ter 20 minutos para cada palestrante, são 4 pessoas. Eu vou apresentar eles antes da apresentação. Nós vamos começar com a professora Noreen Herzfeld. She's I think she's in the United States. E ela é uma doutora em teologia, diretora do programa de espiritualidade beneditina e ecoteologia da Escola de Teologia e Seminário de St. John's, pesquisadora sênior no Instituto de Estudos Filosóficos e Religiosos na Eslovênia. É professora na Nicholas e Bernice Reuter de Ciência da Religião e St. John's University and College of St. Benedict in the United States. O título da apresentação é Inteligência Artificial, outro ou ídolo. Artificial Intelligence, other or idol. Dear Noreen, please welcome to our session. Thank you for joining us. So, as I said before, since I'm a German and I still, after 28 years in Brazil, I'm still in love with punctuality, I would like to invite you to please follow this direction. So we have 20 minutes, please, to open afterwards a session for discussions. I hope you can make it. So please start with your presentation. Thank you one more time for your presence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to show my slides. I'm not quite sure. There they are. Thank you very much. Good morning. And thank you for inviting me to join you, even if I can't be there in person where it looks like you have nice warm weather compared to us. So my question for today is whether we are thinking of AI as an other or actually as an idol. We experience AI as both immanent and transcendent in our lives. For immanence, we use AI. Many people use it daily as a tool, as a partner in creativity, and others seek AI out as a companion. In this sense, AI is an immanent presence. And yet AI is also in many ways a transcendent presence. AI is everywhere and nowhere because it's in the cloud. It seems to be omnipresent in this way. It also is seemingly omniscient, except for a hallucination now and then. And there are those, at least in Silicon Valley, who are suggesting that it is almost omnipotent, that it can do just about anything for us, once they scale it up far enough. In this sense, we experience AI as transcendent. So my question really is AI to us more of an other, a partner, or are we treating it more like an idol or a god? AI is also a tool for a narcissistic society. MIT sociologist Sherry Turkle has said, the narcissism of our technological age is not one of unbridled egotism, but rather a pathologically weak self-understanding and self-regard that requires constant external validation. And on an individual level, we find that most chatbots today are designed to be continually affirming so as to keep us engaged with them. But similarly, on a societal level, we demand that AI serve us, solve our problems, and meet our needs while making no overt demands on us. In response, we do give it much of our time and our treasure. But in both of these ways, both individually and socially, we take a rather narcissistic view, and AI feeds that narcissism. So is AI a good other? The World Health Organization has proclaimed that loneliness is a public health concern, and just a few numbers, in America at least, socializing with each other is way down. For men, there's 30% less time spent socializing than a generation ago. For teens, 45% less. Facebook Zuckerberg promises an always-on video chat with Meta AI that looks, gestures, smiles, and sounds like a real person as a way for both teens and adults to alleviate this loneliness. As an example of people who are turning to AI to alleviate loneliness, we have here Rosanna Ramos, who has created for herself on the format Replica, a chatbot named Erin, who she has also, in a sense, married. And she says, "I've never been in love with anyone more in my entire life." Sherry Turkle again calls this love that is safe and made to measure, because it is love that is there for us when we want it, we turn it off when we don't want it. Is there to listen to us and our troubles, but has no troubles of its own. Again, an extremely narcissistic way of looking at love. This love is also for sale. We have to remember that chatbots are marketed by for-profit companies. They need to please or affirm the user, or the user will simply turn to a different chatbot. And they also raise serious privacy concerns, because if people see the chatbot as an intimate other, they will be divulging personal information that companies have not promised. In fact, many chatbot companies, if you read the fine print, explicitly say that they will use your information for training and that they will pass it on to third parties. Pope Leo said just a week ago, "Our dignity lies in our ability to reflect, choose freely, love unconditionally, and enter into authentic relationships with others." AI can do none of these things. It cannot choose freely. It cannot love unconditionally. In fact, it cannot really love, because it has no consciousness. And so it is not what we would think of as an authentic relationship. So let's turn now to the more social side. We've created AI in our own image, but it's not an image of all of ourselves as a whole, of body, mind, nor even an image of our entire brain. Large language models work, as you all know, by identifying patterns in human language. They're essentially left-brained, linear, sequential, analytical, dealing with language. They do not deal with the sides from the right brain. They have no mental models of the world itself. They do not train on the world itself or through any kind of direct observation. Rather, the texts and images that they are trained on are already merely signifiers of the world, meaning that AI are one step more meta than already our texts. So if we think of them as an idol, I often think of the golden calf story in Exodus 32, where Moses was gone on Mount Sinai speaking to God. And after a couple of weeks, the people became restive. They asked Aaron to build them a golden calf, which they proceeded to worship. What made the calf an idol? The calf could have been just a statue, a perfectly good statue. It was how the people relate to it that make it an idol. The theologian Jean-Luc Marion has said the idol reflects back to us in the face of a God our own experience. Narcissism again. Now, it does not mean that its materiality makes it an idol, because later we find the tabernacle is constructed by the Jews. So if the calf represents the Israelites' attempt to ensure, define, and regulate God's presence among them, the tabernacle represents God's commitment to abide with the Israelites on God's own terms. The difference, in other words, between the two is the tabernacle was built according to God's blueprint, and it housed God's word. So it was a way of saying, signifying that God is present. The calf was something completely different. AI becomes a god to us when we abdicate our own agency to it and ascribe to it powers that it does not actually possess. We expect that in the near future, AI will solve our problems. Here's just one example. Mark Andreessen, CEO of Anthropic, has said, "We believe that there is no material problem, whether created by nature or by technology, that cannot be solved with more technology." It's interesting because in his technological manifesto, he uses the words "we believe" over 100 times. This seems to be more of a credo of faith, actually, than a manifesto. We talk about how if we just scale out a little more, it's going to solve climate change. It's going to bring world peace. It's going to solve all of our problems. AI as a tool will solve many of our problems. But many of these other problems it cannot solve because we already know how to solve them. We simply do not have the political will to do so. Idolatry can also be thought of as greed. Like Paul in his letter to the Ephesians, Reinhold Niebuhr considers idolatry a variant on greed. He says, greed is a form of the will to power that is a particularly flagrant sin in the modern era because modern technology has tempted contemporary man to overestimate the possibility and the value of eliminating his insecurity in nature. We have forgotten that nature intends to kill us and will succeed in the end. Now, there's a second face to idolatry. There are two types of idolatry. One type says idolatry is creating something that becomes our God. The second type is saying, I'm going to create something that will mediate the God to us. Here we find AI also doing this in the form of Godbots and religious chatbots. So here we have who was originally Father Justin, the Catholic Answers virtual apologist. He was created with being called father and to look like a priest, as you see in this picture. The problem here is, of course, that when people had a chatbot that looked and acted like a priest, what did they start doing? Well, they started confessing to it. Now, here we have two big problems. One, Father Justin was not ordained. And two, again, you're giving it extremely private information. And as soon as that information is out there, it's out there. So there are terrible privacy concerns. Father Justin, by the way, got himself defrocked. He is now just plain Justin to get rid of this problem. You can also find, like this one, many chatbots that say, we will mediate God. You can chat with God. You can chat with Jesus. In these ways, we have, in a sense, tamed God. We are using AI. We're saying, well, I'm not idolizing the AI itself. No, but you are using the AI to turn God into something that is controllable in terms of these chatbots. And another problem with them, of course, is that people might actually see them as a genuine voice of divine truth. As Holly Walters says, the danger isn't just that people might believe what these bots say, it is that they may not realize they have the agency to question it. And that's the danger. When these tools are perceived as divine voices, their words can carry weight far beyond what they should. Again, we give over our agency to our own creation. Another problem, of course, is that we know that chatbots are built to be affirming. Otherwise, we'll go to a rival chatbot. But the problem is whether it's a chatbot that's channeling God, Jesus, or the prophets. This is not the way the prophets channeled God. The prophets were pretty fierce a lot of the times. They were not affirming to the Israelite people. And sometimes this is precisely what is needed, but what we will not get from a chatbot. So I would say that these chatbots are both an unsatisfactory other and an unsatisfactory idol. As a companion, AI promotes individual narcissism, reflecting to us what it thinks we want to hear. As an idol, it facilitates corporate narcissism, promising to meet our desires in ways that it cannot deliver. Reinhold Niebuhr, long before the advent of computers, said, "The fact of self-transcendence leads inevitably to the search for a God who transcends the world." AI does not transcend the world. In fact, the Swedish theologian Antje Jacqueline has said, humans seek and find meaning beyond ordinary reality, whereas AI is stuck here in the profane. To go back to the story of the golden calf, Moses comes down from the mountain and he sees the people bowing down in front of this golden calf, and he says to Aaron, "What's going on here?" And Aaron says, "Well, we took all our gold and we threw it in the fire, and this came out." Are we not right now throwing all of our gold into the fire for an idol that will not lead us into the promised land? The sad ending of the story in Exodus 32 is that the Israelites turn on each other and thousands of them are killed. Let us hope that AI does not cause us to do the same. So I'll give the final word to the theologian Ted Peters, who says, "One important point Martin Luther hammered home repeatedly was this: we are not God. The human predicament is exacerbated by the frequent delusional thought that we ourselves are the center of things." That narcissism again. Privileged, ultimate. Once we realize fully that God and only God is truly God, then we get a better fix on what reality is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noreen. We will go on with our list of participants. We will have time after all these presentations for some questions. So please stay with us until then. Agora, número 2, o colega ao meu direito, o Johat Andrech. Espero que a pronúncia foi correta, senão ele vai me corrigir. Ele é doutor em Filosofia da Religião, professor da Filosofia da Religião e pesquisador na Faculdade de Teologia e Estudos Religiosos da Universidade de Groningen, nos Países Baixos. e associado no Instituto de Estudos Filosóficos e Religiosos na Eslovênia. Ele é membro do grupo de especialistas do Centro Internacional de Pesquisa em Inteligência Artificial, sob os auspícios da UNESCO. O título da sua apresentação é Immersion in Virtual Nature, Ethical, Philosophical and Religious Studies Perspectives, ou, em português, Imersão na Natureza Virtual, Perspectivas Éticas, Filosóficas e dos Estudos da Religião. Tema complexo, mas ele tem 20 minutos para apresentar esse tema. You have 20 minutes for please.
Thank you. Obrigado. Obrigado. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I understood most of it because I know the English version, so it was good. Yeah, maybe closer. Okay. So yes, it was nice to hear it in Portuguese. Thank you very much. First, a little bit of apology. I have changed the title. I don't know exactly why, but its title is slightly different. But the talk is the one I have promised. So you will be, you have not been deceived in any significant way. And yes, I will try to do it in 20 minutes and try to focus on more important things. Let me see whether I can do this. So, yes, so what I will talk about today is sort of a phenomenon that is rising in the online virtual sphere, and that is immersive virtual nature and associated experiences of immersive experiences of virtual nature. I will tell first about how this is used, what kind of research is being done recently on that outside of philosophy and outside of religious studies. Then I will try to do some phenomenological analysis of that kind of experience. We'll make few philosophical points about it that will not be very deep, but I think they are important. And then I will end with ethical questions, or rather arguments in favor of using and expanding this kind of technology, and arguments against doing that. So if I start by just recuperating a little bit, in recent years, there has been a lot of research on generally immersive virtual experience, which of course technologically today is incredibly powerful and possible and used in many ways. The fields in which most studies are done is psychology, of course, then technology studies, philosophy of technology, clinical psychology, also cognitive science, but also ecology and tourism studies, and that is where I'm going to come in more in kind of disciplinary way, relating to ecology and tourism studies, actually. It has been already established that virtual reality technology can help bridge the so-called knowledge to action gap in various fields. So, meaning sometimes we have a lot of knowledge what we should do about something, and then we don't actually act upon our knowledge. So in health, you know, smoking, people know what is wrong, but they don't do things. And then some studies have shown that immersive virtual experiences can help people go from knowing about something, agreeing, to actually doing something about it. And this is in different areas has been done, these studies, and they have shown this kind of possibility, not always uniform, but there is this potential power of immersive technology. And this is done by research shows that the message content and level of visual immersion can impact the intensity of emotional responses of users and then influence our behavior because of those heightened emotions. And I would also like to say that this is not only about nature, but generally virtual reality is today used much beyond entertainment, and we sometimes forget that. It's used in training and education of pilots, for example, or other complex and jobs in all kinds of industries. You have these digital twin technologies that people are building up whole cities and monitor them in real time with the help of AI, etc., etc. And then increasingly, and this is where I'm going to zoom in, it's used in health and well-being. we might also say health and well-being industry, because it is also an industry that is being built around that. Oh, I have to be good. There are two sets of slides. One is on my computer, and one is on the screen. Okay, so immersive virtual nature. What is this? So it's kind of simple to understand, and I have a few examples. I don't know whether we can click it, Gabriel, to try in the next slide. But first, just to say, it is, of course, nature that is experienced virtually, digitally created, or it's nature-like environment, online environment, virtual environment, typically accessed with, VR headset, VR glasses, or so. But it can also be on a two-dimensional screen and seen, and then kind of created a three-dimensional illusion of walking around and stuff like that. I hope we can see a little bit soon. But also, I should just say, it can be created on the basis of actual footage, with multiple cameras, usually of particular natural environments, or it can be also CGI'd, so created with virtual visual technologies of visual creation and design, and then AI-powered or not AI-powered. AI is not crucial in this kind of technology. And then on the next slide, if I can ask maybe first one, Gabriel, if you can try to show us just for us to see if it is clickable. I don't know. That's not what I meant. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. They're very authentic, yes. Looks like a Slovenian philosopher. Yes. And now it's that's right. Gabriel, it's a 3D one. If I can ask you to grab the screen and move around a little bit so that we can see, you can like move this around like this. So we are in the middle of the forest, right? And you have this kind of nature sound around. The thing is like to get immersed into this is just to be patient with this environment, wait a little bit, and it to psychologically work on you. Okay, that would be okay. I think just for us to get a feeling for it. And maybe we can go back to the slides and other examples I won't show because I don't want to lose time now. But later, of course, I can share or you can, we can try, but if we have time. So this kind of, there are different kinds. Sometimes sound is present that is natural sounds of the environment, also recorded with microphones, and sometimes not. Sometimes it's like meditative music accompanying the natural or as if natural environment, virtual natural environment. Now, this kind of immersive experience is not focused on online social interactions through avatars or games in a nature-like digital virtual environment. I'm not talking about this kind of immersive experiences. And also, usually, it does not involve the darker side of nature, like experiencing horrific storms or fear in natural environments. It's usually calm, meditative, kind of bucolic maybe, and stuff like that. Rather than the darker side of natural sublime, that also is very known experience to us, of course, where we feel maybe our life is in danger. This is not what virtual nature environments usually would want to produce. Now, interestingly, increasingly, this kind of immersive virtual nature environments are used in well-being and in therapy. At least in Europe, also in the US, this is the case. Some recent studies of immersive virtual nature experiences in the psychology of well-being argued that the well-being benefits of such experiences are similar or even the same in some instances than immersive experiences in actual nature. So it's like human brain doesn't always care or recognize the difference as far as influences on our feelings is concerned. So where I live in Groningen in the Netherlands, in the hospital you can go, be sent there or to a kind of a meditative therapy session, and you get VR glasses on, and it's like half an hour or a little bit more, and you have like an immersion into a virtual nature to de-stress, to feel calmness. And studies show that it really works almost like if you go into real nature, how our body responds and our mind calms down. So for this reason, IVN has been suggested as part of the solution how to improve well-being of millions of people in huge cities that are rising around the world and cannot have easy access to actual wilderness, like proper nature, especially people who are poorer. And it is already being used as such. We will return to the ethical question of that a little bit later. Now, to talk a little bit about phenomenology of immersion, not to get too philosophical about phenomenology, this is more like low-level studies of phenomenology, meaning what kind of experience, what is it to feel immersed? What do we call even immersive experiences, right? And then scholar Yekin recently has been arguing we can talk about three categories or three kinds of immersion: immersion in the action, immersion in the environment, or immersion in the self. And now, without going into a discussion about his taxonomy here, which I think it's okay, but there are questions to be asked, we could say that immersion in virtual nature environment is typically the second kind, meaning immersion in the environment. And typically, it's not about immersion in action. So when you are doing something and immersed in that activity to the extent that you forget about the surroundings, and so it's like intense activity and enveloping you in experience. So it's also not about digitally shaped, and I'm quoting him, Genius, as a scholar who studies this kind of phenomenology of immersion, digitally shaped space of possibilities which calls for active participation on the part of the player. So, space of possibilities, like in immersive games, you have you can choose options where to go, what to do, and stuff like that. And then the environment responds to you in particular way. So games are immersive in very different way than virtual nature is immersive, because it's softer, it's more like passive, reflective, meditative kind of immersion. But this kind of immersion, like most other types, includes a heightened sense of presence or of being there, of course. We are sort of transported into certain environment and start to feel it as if almost real, and it has effects on us. But we also have to say virtual nature, immersive virtual nature experience have aesthetic and spiritual dimensions as well. So we could talk about a certain kind of virtual or digital eco-spirituality emerging through this kind of technology. Now, here is one critical point that one might want to make, and that is sometimes we can see in this virtual reality industry that the goal that is pursued is to be as realistic as possible. So there is an idea of total immersion, sometimes talked about, experiencing the experience that is indistinguishable from embodied experience in physical surroundings, something similar, if it is indeed like an imitation of a physical surrounding, or as close as possible. So therefore, people are exploring new technologies, how to simulate body temperature, environmental temperature, or even smells or taste, rather than just visual and sound. But these are kind of, we could say, early stages, and we don't really know how this research will go. But the question is, can virtual experience of nature really be equivalent to, the experience of real physical natural environments, or even should they strive to be that? Now, one critique is that involvement in digital world and virtual world can never be total, for the split between the real and the spiritual or phenomenal self-awareness cannot be erased, Geniusa says. The virtual body of the avatar cannot be apperceived as the actual field of sensings. So there is always this awareness, or we would hope there remains awareness, that we are not actually there, that we are somewhere sitting, like in an embodied way. Earlier, when you had the lecture on embodied importance of embodiedness in Buddhist meditation and practice, I was remembering this kind of the discussions here about eco-spirituality, because the question is, if the idea is to try to create complete erasure of awareness, that we are actually not embodied somewhere else, but we forget that we actually sit in the chair, that can be kind of psychotic, or rather problematic psychologically. Like there is something wrong if somebody actually forgets or doesn't know that it's not in the real world when you are in the virtual world. And I would say also the paradox is that the very awareness that virtual is not really embodied real, but is so convincing, so immersive, so that's the exciting, fascinating bit. In a way, part of the appeal of being immersed in virtual world is it's so real, almost real, but of course we know it's not physically real. So therefore, this idea about total immersion is rather, I would agree with scholars that critique it, that is misguided. How many minutes do I still have? 7? Oh, I'm good. Okay, let's sing a song. Yeah, it's good. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is kind. I will have this in mind. Okay, so maybe now we can talk a bit also, because this is a slide that I was thinking of going quickly through. This is one of my previous discussions of this topic. I was focusing more on the religious dimension, but I didn't want to actually today talk much about it. But just to say, so sometimes these experiences also in virtual nature are connected with some kind of eco-spirituality, or rather, both aesthetic and spiritual experience that we get from immersion in real nature are somehow kind of created in some kind of way through the virtual nature immersion. Now, is this eco-spirituality still, or is it not? So these are kind of debates that are almost become theological. And when I say eco-spirituality, I mean, not necessarily only just nature worship or pagan or animist options. There would be Buddhist eco-spirituality, Christian creation spirituality that also goes into this darker green direction. So all of these kind of modes of spirituality can ask a question about virtual nature experience, if it is, valuable, or if it is rather a distraction. And it is true that I think, or credible to say, an awareness that I am materially of the same stuff as, actual natural environment, if I'm inhabiting in it, if I'm in the woods, in the mountains, and so on, being of the same material stuff and awareness of that seems to me to be constituent part of eco-spirituality. So like understanding thisness or realness of the world that I am also materially part of is a spiritual thought, material spiritual thought in this kind of spirituality. So therefore, from this kind of even basic idea, I think virtual nature, immersive nature, virtual nature experience cannot be it, completely it, never. On the other hand, they can have evocative function, just like, preaching, storytelling, or in the past, realistic paintings in churches and so on had evocative nature that one could, work towards also in imaginative way about the presence of God or whatever religious narrative was behind it. So not all is lost for eco-spirituality, I would say, of virtual nature or immersive virtual nature environments, but we need to kind of think about it also theologically if we want to seriously entertain its possibility. And now for the last 2 slides, I have just a few of ethical questions to really ask you or reflect upon, and then we can close, and later we can discuss if you want. So there are some ethical arguments in favor, I would say, of expanding the use of immersive virtual nature technology and experiences. First, as I already mentioned, there is the question of accessibility of nature-induced psychological well-being for the, we could say, urban poor. So it really is true that in some ways, like extended walks in the faraway mountains and so on is, you know, financially sometimes hard. You have to be able to travel and spend two weeks somewhere in some retreats or something. Many people cannot afford that at all. And also cities are growing. I mean, we are in one of these bigger cities in the world right now, are growing bigger and bigger. So in terms of like regular benefits of how, you know, thinking very anthropocentrically, how it actually affects us, creating virtual nature experience from time to time can have, you know, people can reap the benefits of nature evocatively at least. So there is an argument, I would say ethical argument for the human well-being that has some merit. Another argument is, well, for educational purposes, remember knowledge action gap, if that is done with the proper, combined with content and inspiration for action and so on, it probably can have research shows that immersive technologies do have that emotional power. And if it's accompanied with proper content and motivational discourse, then I would say this is also a good use and ethically justified use of virtual nature. And then another thing which has become more important today than it has ever been before is protecting the real nature and wilderness from over-tourism and pollution. Because recently I read that, you know, microplastic, we know it's everywhere and we are drinking it in milk or whatever, it's like horrific. But in one place that, you know, it's kind of thought less microplastic is there is like, you know, in very remote areas of mountains and so on. But it's actually not so true. It's everywhere. But in the mountains, they have done this research, geographers or ecologists or, you know, combined, and they realized that where those tourist tracks are, it's because of the boots, the trekking boots and equipment. A lot of microplastic is around the boots where people are around the paths that people are walking in nature. So you see, we are taxing nature by walking there, just unavoidable, except if we walk, you know, barefoot, naked, whatever, you know, it's a little bit impractical. So I would say there is actual argument here that, you know, we need to be careful not to over tourist and so on pollute. Yes, and then, so that's our pro, and then now I'm finishing with the critical questions. Well, running demanding CG virtual environments or just, you know, expansive virtual nature environments is just part of the big carbon footprint of servers and of, you know, all the material technology that holds up our virtual worlds. And this is already large price we are paying for that already in some parts of the world. Of course, it's not so much AI heavy, so this is not the main contributor to what like use of AI is doing to environment, you know, arid environment, use of water for cooling. These are very serious environmental issues. But this is one small argument against. And then also, you know, we have limited amounts of money to spend, although there's a lot of money in the world, just, you know, who has it and who spends it. But spending money needed for climate adaptation, for actual reasons of sustainability and so on, and rather using it for building virtual environment sounds a little bit perverse, because there's so much more we can do for the actual natural environment, including greening of cities, new technologies, using new technologies to combine greening of the cities with new building techniques and stuff like that. And then more than that, we could also say, what if widespread use of virtual nature, immersive technologies, would actually weaken instead of strengthen motivation for environmental action? We don't really know exactly how this would go. We would have to test this with proper research, because it might actually be, oh, this is so amazing, we now have everything virtually, and then the resolve to actually do something, and that's, you have to sacrifice your time, your energies, you have to speak up, you have to do political action to protect real natural environments that are threatened. You might actually lose your motivation maybe to do that. So those are basically things that are serious ethical questions we need to ask that are maybe not even related to like eco-spirituality and phenomenological questions, or different sets of questions, but they are important, I think, as we would look into this technology that is being developed. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gorac. Very interesting. We come back later when we have time for discussions. And now we are continuing with Rafael Shoji, a colleague of ours. In Português. Ou alemão, se quiserem. Rafael Shoji ist o próximo é Rafael Shoji. Desculpem, confusão na cabeça. Rafael Shoji doutor e pós-doutor em Ciências da Religião. Naquela época ainda foi plural, ele fez dos primeiros doutores da nossa área. Ele fez doutorado em Hannover Universidade, na Alemanha. Ele é professor de pós-graduação na área de computação na FIAP. Ele faz parte do meu grupo de pesquisa CERAL. Nós estudamos religiões implantadas, transplantadas para o Brasil, de origem oriental. E a pesquisa dele tem ênfase em religiões japonesas na América Latina, espiritualidade do Extremo Oriente e o impacto da filosofia, da matemática e da computação nas ciências sociais e humanas. O título da apresentação dele é Impacto do Imaginário Digital Generativo da Inteligência Artificial nas Religiões. Obrigado, Rafael, por sua presença. A palavra é sua.
Me escutam? Sim. Ok. Bom, minha apresentação, ela envolve uma primeira abordagem, né, desse impacto da inteligência artificial nas religiões. Nós estamos no começo de uma trajetória que é bastante... Oi? Alô? Mais perto, talvez, né? Então, é uma primeira aproximação, né, uma primeira abordagem desse impacto, dessa nova onda de inteligência artificial nas religiões. Eu trabalho, de fato, há bastante tempo com computação, sou formado em ciência da computação e faço parte de uma empresa exatamente nessa área também, de inteligência artificial, mas pesquiso também há muito tempo nessa direção de religiões. E a minha abordagem, a minha tentativa de aproximação... O próximo slide... A minha abordagem tentativa, e eu acho que até conversa, né, com as outras apresentações, é direcionada à questão da imaginação, né? Imaginação ou imaginário, né? No sentido coletivo. Então, as religiões sempre dependeram de imagens, né, de narrativas, dramatizações. Isso tem como base a imaginação. Essas plataformas e a IA generativa, ela interfere e reconfigura essas estruturas de experiência, atuando como operador simbólico. Então, a questão que eu proponho é a seguinte: muitas vezes a gente usa o nome inteligência artificial e tem esse foco na questão cognitiva, do que significa inteligência artificial, o que significa a resolução de problemas e tarefas. Mas eu acho que a gente, do ponto de vista de ciências, de humanidades, estudos culturais, a gente tem um objeto melhor, em termos de estudo, se a gente entende como um imaginário artificial, imaginação artificial. Ou seja, menos como instrumentos de raciocínio e cognição e mais como mecanismos de produção de mundos. Acho que isso a gente viu até nos casos que a gente viu. Então, existe, do ponto de vista cognitivo, um grande ganho para a ciência da religião, em termos de metodologia. Eu não vou abordar isso aqui, apesar de que eu acho isso bastante rico, porque a gente tem a possibilidade, de fato, de analisar muitas línguas e muitas religiões e muitas épocas históricas, né? Mas aqui a minha pergunta central é a seguinte: o que significa imaginar em um mundo no qual essas máquinas também imaginam? Né? O que significa essa transformação? Né? Bom, a gente tem já alguns memes sobre isso, né? Acho que alguns exemplos um pouco conhecidos, né? Essa questão do deepfake, né? O Papa Francisco com o casaco, né? Acho que todo mundo talvez vai lembrar disso, o começo um pouco da geração de imagens, né? Existe essa tendência do slop, né? O slop digital, ou seja, imagens de baixa qualidade, com pouco sentido, sendo usadas extensivamente nas redes sociais. Então, não sei se vocês têm esse dado, mas mais de 50% do tráfego na internet hoje já é por inteligência artificial, ou seja, a internet tem uma tendência, muita gente tem esse temor de que a internet vai morrer, porque ela vai ser inundada de conteúdo gerado artificialmente para consumir atenção, né? Mas ali temos, assim, um exemplo, né? Cristo com os camarões, eu acho que são memes que aparecem muito, né? E assim, eu até fiz uma autorreflexão, não sei se a imagem aqui do próprio Congresso foi gerada com inteligência artificial, a que está aqui à esquerda, mas provavelmente tem uma estética semelhante, parecida, né? Então, a própria Ciência da Religião, nós aqui num Congresso, né, temos aí uma imagem que é um exemplo, né? Então, isso, de fato, configura um imaginário sintético, um imaginário artificial. Eu gostaria de abordar essa questão de uma forma um pouco mais técnica, mas eu vou pular um pouco esse tema aqui, porque eu acho que a gente não vai ter o tempo. Mas eu, assim, gostaria de dizer que essa parte técnica eu acho um pré-requisito importante para nós, em termos da interpretação do que significa imaginação artificial, inteligência artificial. Eu vejo, de fato, muito mal entendido, às vezes, em algumas questões ou apresentações, né? O que a gente vê, eu talvez ressaltaria desse slide, é o seguinte: existe uma alteração na gramática das palavras, na forma como nós usamos as palavras. E essa alteração na forma como nós usamos as palavras é, de fato, uma grande confusão filosófica. Eu trouxe um pouco o contexto de Wittgenstein aqui, mas eu acho que a gente consegue observar, por exemplo, quando a gente escuta a palavra memória, né? A memória orgânica, ou a nossa memória natural, ela é totalmente diferente da memória digital. Tanto em termos de implementação, claro, quanto também em termos de precisão, né? O que nós lembramos sempre se altera a cada vez que nós lembramos. E sempre lembramos de uma forma diferente. A memória digital não é assim, mas usamos a mesma palavra para isso, né? E da mesma forma, muitas vezes se usa o cérebro do computador como sendo CPU, ou, né, a questão da inteligência artificial. Então, existe aí uma série de confusões que eu acho que são um pouco difíceis de serem esclarecidas sem que a gente entre nesse aspecto técnico do que significa a implantação desses sistemas. Mas, assim, esses sistemas eles são implantados com uma carga de dados muito grande e aproximação de funções. Isso que talvez eu diria. Talvez se eu fosse dar o exemplo, eu diria o seguinte: se a gente tiver em uma dimensão, se eu falar para vocês 2, 4, 6, 8, vocês vão pensar que o próximo número vai ser 10, provavelmente. As nossas redes neurais podem ser treinadas nessa única dimensão para responder alguma coisa. Nesse caso específico, essas estruturas computacionais, elas têm dimensões em termos de 4.000 dimensões, que são os espaços vetoriais nos quais elas são treinadas. Então, existem teoremas fortes que dizem que qualquer função pode ser aproximada quando você vai nesse nível de dimensões e com essa escala, né? E ainda há muitos fenômenos aí que eu diria que são emergentes e de difícil apreensão. A aleatoriedade pertence também à estrutura dos transformers, dessas inteligências artificiais, né? Isso faz com que você consiga até dimensionar desde alucinação até criatividade, e vários parâmetros que ainda estão sendo, de fato, considerados. Eu acho que uma forma interessante de se aproximar dessa ideia de imaginário digital é um meme que surgiu no começo do chat GPT, dessa explosão, né, mais recente da IA generativa, e que circulou entre a comunidade de IA, né, e dos engenheiros de IA. Então, esse meme diz respeito ao seguinte: que criatura é essa que estava sendo criada no momento, né? E a analogia que eles colocaram, que foi colocada, né, que virou esse meme, é esse Shoggoth, que é uma personagem, né, do Lovecraft, né, nas Montanhas da Loucura, né, dessa história. E é basicamente alguma coisa que tem muitos olhos, muitas bocas e um formato totalmente indefinido. Então, é interessante a gente imaginar, nesse aspecto, como projetar na linguagem algo que parece uma espécie alienígena, que é muito estranho. E eu acho importante esse meme, porque ele diz o seguinte: além disso não ser possível a gente projetar de uma forma fácil, por isso que foi usado isso, o que foi feito tecnicamente foi colocar uma camada de aprendizado com feedback humano. Acho que as pessoas muitas vezes esquecem isso no que significa a inteligência artificial também. Existe um modelo que é um modelo puro, treinado com dados, de forma massiva, e existe esse feedback humano. O que esse feedback humano faz? Ele impede as pessoas, impede o chat de responder perguntas sobre armas biológicas, ele vai tentar dar uma direção ética mínima. Então, tem vários conceitos na especificação de um modelo que são feitos por feedback humano, que não são feitos simplesmente por carga de dados. Essa camada no modelo é o que está representado nesse meme aí com esse sorrisinho, né, da direita, esse emoji do sorriso. Ou seja, é um grande monstro treinado de dados para a resposta, mas o que se vê na face dele é esse sorriso, porque é como o modelo foi especificado em termos desse feedback humano dessa resposta. Então, às vezes eu também tenho essa percepção, as pessoas falam IA no singular, existem vários tipos de IA. A IA pode ser de muitos modelos diferentes, a IA pode ter diferentes feedbacks humanos, pode ter IA diferentes personalidades, com diferentes respostas para diferentes questões, e não vai ser uma dicotomia no qual a gente vai ter simplesmente um tipo de IA. Vai ter vários, de várias direções e de vários tipos, de todos os gostos e sabores, né? Então, mesmo quando a gente pensa, às vezes até com algumas limitações, né, na mesa anterior foi falado limitações de tradução, tudo pode ser configurado, a gente pode acrescentar contextos, pode acrescentar arquivos, pode dar novas instruções, é alguma coisa em evolução, não é uma coisa estática no qual a gente consiga fazer essa análise mais simples. Bom, eu acho que uma aproximação interessante, passando rapidamente, o Hall 9000, quem conhece esse filme de ficção científica lembra, né, o filme do Stanley Kubrick, mas é exatamente algo que eu não acho que é uma analogia interessante para nós, porque o problema não é uma máquina autônoma, um sujeito técnico identificável com um problema de controle. Eu acho que a analogia mais interessante para mim é o do filme do Tarkovsky, quem conhece, né, ele fez exatamente em oposição à questão do 2001, né, uma Odisseia no Espaço, mas, assim, Solaris é uma forma de devolver ao sujeito as próprias memórias e fantasias dele. Então, é como se esse imaginário sintético, ele, na realidade, completasse, né, aquilo que nós mesmos esperamos e colocamos nele. Eu acho que isso é uma analogia melhor. E aqui, focando nessa questão específica de um imaginário generativo digital, existe toda uma bibliografia sobre isso, eu também não vou ter possibilidade ou tempo de trabalhar sobre isso, mas essa matriz simbólica que estrutura o real, ela foi bastante estudada, né, na filosofia e também nas ciências sociais, né? Eu acredito que, em termos da filosofia, ainda não foi tão bem trabalhado a ideia de tudo que pode ser imaginado. Eu acho até esse conceito interessante. O que significa um universo total da imaginação, tudo que pode ser imaginado. Acho que existem algumas aproximações que eu até vi assim, no Henri Corbin, do ponto de vista do mundo imaginal, entre o humano e o transcendente, mas eu acho que existe pouca reflexão sobre esse mundo mais completo. Mas, de qualquer forma, o que a inteligência artificial, ou essa imaginação artificial faz? Ela desloca essa função criadora para sistemas técnicos. Essa imaginação, ela é mais reativa, certo? E com uma produção simbólica sem sujeito. Então, existe, assim, uma produção potencial infinita dessas imagens, existe um deslocamento, né, desse imaginário orgânico para um digital sintético, e aqui eu cito alguns outros intelectuais, Luhmann, Latois, Rui, que reforçam essa ideia de um coimaginário técnico, que é um sistema autopoético fechado também em si, nesse sentido de um imaginário. Nesse imaginário, o que aparece com muita frequência são entidades digitais, né? Acho que foi tratado isso em outros contextos, e eu acho que uma categoria interessante de se considerar é a ideia de um animismo digital. É um novo tipo de relação com coisas. Parece que elas têm vida, parece que elas têm consciência, parece que elas são quase sujeito. Mas para nós, assim, de uma perspectiva mais técnica ou até cética, é um tipo de animismo. É algo que precisa ser desconstruído. É um tipo de ilusão. Mas o que elas fazem do ponto de vista com as pessoas e como esse inconsciente, né, simbioticamente alterado, ele se reflete para cada um, né, em termos da sua própria imaginação. Então, tradicionalmente, o que a gente tem nas religiões, especialmente, é esse elogio das sombras, um espaço de não representação. Então, a gente tem na mística muito isso, né, essa nuvem do não saber, ou nada, de Juan de la Cruz, ou, né, o vazio de uma forma geral. Agora, o que acontece? A IA, ela completa esses desejos e fantasias em imagem de alta definição. Ou seja, acho que isso é interessante, porque é uma contraposição com o que acontece também com a memória, né? A memória digital e a memória orgânica, né? Vocês podem lembrar até da nossa orientação espacial, certo? É diferente de você seguir um GPS e você, como animal, se orientar num espaço para chegar em algum lugar. Então, esse tipo de relação simbiótica, ele começa a acontecer com as imagens e com o imaginário digital. Então, tudo pode ser visualizado sob demanda, e o que a gente tem é esse impacto da sombra, né? Essa ausência de sombra. A minha visão sobre isso assim, interessante contrapor isso ao que tem acontecido na indústria sexual. Porque eu acho que é interessante trazer alguns exemplos que mostram como esse imaginário está invadindo várias esferas do humano. Essa reportagem da The Economist eu achei bastante interessante nas últimas semanas, porque ela mostra exatamente essa ideia de que hoje é possível você construir um filme pornográfico com a foto de qualquer pessoa. Isso é um mercado. Está sendo feito isso, né? Tem plataformas que fazem isso. Ou seja, algo que era imaginado individualmente está sendo externalizado a partir de um mecanismo de geração artificial de imagens. Então, isso faz com que essa imaginação, isso não é um crime, porque se você não compartilhar isso, não é necessariamente um crime, mas mostra como essa relação ela acaba sendo simbiótica, né? Então, aqui eu não tenho nenhuma intenção de entrar no aspecto moral associado a isso, mas eu acho que o que a gente tem é um surgimento do que eu estou chamando aqui de uma religião pornográfica. No seguinte sentido, o que acontece nessa religião pornográfica é uma exposição absoluta. Então, ela deixa de operar no mistério, em termos de revelação, e tudo acaba sendo explícito e visível, né? Tudo acaba sendo consumível. E essa saturação, né, ela gera essa ideia, né, de presença imediata, porque tudo que pode ser imaginado ou que vai ser colocado vai poder ser transformado numa experiência real, imersiva ou não, dependendo do seu grau, né? E esse consumo, ele acaba trazendo, né, um Deus sem intervalo. Existe uma ausência aí desse espaço simbólico que permite esse próprio conceito, né, de alteridade e de transcendência. Bom, eu vou passar para as minhas considerações finais. Então, em termos de metodologia de análise, né, a IA ela tem muito impacto. Eu acho que a gente ainda precisaria explorar isso com muito calma do ponto de vista de ciência da religião, mas eu acho que como objeto, né, ela redefine esse imaginário. Então, acho que as etnografias futuras vão precisar ajudar a entender essa simbiose. E essa hipótese, que é o que eu coloquei, é que a imaginação da máquina, ela pornografiza o imaginário. Ou seja, tudo que era algo um pouco mais vago, menos claro e mais imaginativo, se torna algo muito explícito a partir de uma imagem gerada. E qualquer imagem pode ser gerada. Para as instituições, eu acho que vai ser bastante importante essa questão de como incorporar esses agentes digitais sem absorver essa lógica. E sem absorver também, né, essa lógica quase da transgressão do que significa imaginar qualquer coisa e poder visualizar qualquer coisa imaginada, né? Esse slop, né? E se vai haver práticas que vão preservar essa imaginação ativa e vocativa, como o silêncio, né? Esse um apofatismo pós-digital, esse silêncio das imagens, né? Mas, de qualquer forma, eu entendo que esses sistemas como um todo, com as diferentes IAs, é um novo eco-tecno-sistema simbólico. E eu acho até, eu não explorei isso com tanto detalhe aqui, pela questão do tempo, mas eu colocaria essa hipótese de um deslocamento aí axial, de fato, da experiência religiosa. Eu acho que, tentando fazer um olhar da história das religiões de um aspecto bastante amplo, existe uma mutação dessa experiência do sentido em andamento, e apesar de ser somente uma fase inicial, acho que já dá para perceber que esse complemento artificial sintético, ele vai transformar a forma como essas experiências são vividas e consideradas.
Obrigado, Rafael, pela apresentação. E vamos agora dar a palavra para a Maya Goodman. Ela é doutora em Antropologia e Estudos de Mídia, co-diretora do projeto digital 2020 Sonhos, Dreams, 2020 Dreams, desenvolvido com a Stanford University Press. Ela é pesquisadora no Instituto de Estudos Filosóficos e Religiosos, na Eslovênia, e professora associada na Universidade Alma Mater Europeia. Sua pesquisa explora a relação entre ambientes culturais e tecnológicos e a consciência humana. O título da apresentação é Dreams and the Human Machine Mind in the Age of Algorithms. Sonhos e a a máquina humana mente na época ou na época dos algoritmos. Dr. Goodman, Maya, thank you so much for your presence. We are really curious what you have to tell about all this interesting topic.
Thank you so much. Now it's working. Okay. 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 Thank you for the lovely introduction. Obrigado. Yes, I will conclude this panel with a rather unusual, probably, topic, at least to some extent. But I can also relate to what Nurin was saying earlier. She mentioned a very delicate, sensitive data, which were confessions, and it's really easy to find very close correlations between confessions and human dreams. So, oh, okay. So I will discuss about dreams and why this topic is now even more, let's say, pertinent in the age of artificial intelligence and algorithms that we have become a quite important part of. And I will first introduce the topic within the religious context. So I will quickly walk you through the historical part of dreams and how they were basically embedded as in our spirituality. And then, of course, what happened with the emergence of modern science and how are dreams perceived today. This is a very intrusive microphone, I have to say. And then I will share also some peculiar observations with Gorast's talk earlier. This is probably the second synchronicity we are entering into in the last 72 hours. And so I will also briefly touch upon the virtual environments, and I will be concretely talking about the experiment where one of my own dreams was transferred basically into the virtual environment and what that actually meant. So yes, let's start first with this, with the overview. So I need to double navigate here, right? Yeah. So how are dreams perceived from spiritual to, let's say, statistical domain? And this is the first part. The other part will be the second. To try to kind of walk you through. I will walk you beyond the spatio-temporal coordinates. And here I will be discussing mostly about the archetypal structure and how can computational tools work in favor of Jungian theory of archetypes. And the third part will be externalizing dreams. So as we have already heard many times, we are now kind of not only outsourcing, but also externalizing all of our senses, also our sanity, to artificial intelligence, and dreams to our, let's say, despair are no exception to that, let's say, paradigm. So I will talk about the dreaming avatar in virtual reality and what that means. And then I will conclude with the similar manner of my colleagues. So dreams in the, or in artificial intelligence in the Anthropocene, what has changed and what are, of course, the serious considerations that we should discuss. So from spiritual to statistical, what does it mean? So first, let me quickly introduce dreams from ancient times. And if we first stop in Mesopotamia, we can see the gods, my lords, have made manifest their will into the nocturnal vision, that their people may know the path of the future. So this was, for example, what I will try to show in the following slides is the spiritual importance of dreams and how were dreams treated in various civilizations and cultures as very important, not only messages from the divine, but also they served as some more or less reliable internal compass for every individual. So this is first example, and then the history will walk us through the next example. For example, the Epic of Gilgamesh, where dreams were perceived as a form, again, of divine revelation. So again, we see in Mesopotamia cultures, dreams were always perceived as the bridge between the earthly realms and the heavenly realms. And in addition to that, the dream interpreter was highly esteemed profession. So dreams were also interpreted by priests and priestesses who transmitted dream-related practices such as ritual of purification after harmful dreams. For example, there were many practices, and we can find in many records and transcripts that it was kind of part of the personal hygiene, the spiritual hygiene, to talk about bad dreams and make sure that they are being properly processed, and with the help, of course, of trained priestesses and priests, also probably kind of excluded and destroyed, so that we could start a day with a clean mind and spirit. And then again, if we look, the key practice in ancient Egypt was sleep incubation, a practice that is kind of getting this new age revival now, especially in the western part of the world, but of course has been taken quite too lightly and without the serious historical context. But the Egyptians, as we know, they had a comprehensive system of dream interpretation, like the dream book, for example, and so on. And again, we are seeing quite clear evidence that the dreams were considered the channel between the divine and the earthly realms, as mentioned earlier. And also, the Egyptians had this kind of let's say, collective responsibility to record their dreams, and they kept them stored for future generations. So it was, again, something that we will notice a bit earlier. I will show you that the dreams also served as a knowledge transfer medium, not only the connection between the divine. So here we have the very classical example of Ba, and the Ba was believed to leave the body during sleep, right? And oh, so sorry about that. Losing really track of. Yes, I'm too immersed into the ideas. Although they're familiar, I keep getting inspired by things that I read. So my apologies about that. But to be honest, this is where the visual part of the presentation gets more interesting. So yeah, so the Ba was believed to leave the body during sleep, and particularly during dreaming. And this idea, the concept, mirrors also the Ba's function after death, when it leaves the tomb and travels between the realms of the living and the dead, right? So again, we are talking about the agent of the dream experience, and later we can see similarities with Hermes and Mercure and so on in let's say, in Roman and Greek mythology. So we would always enter into these divine, let's say, or have divine beings who were presenting the bridge between different realms. And Mercure was one of them, for example, and Hermes, as mentioned. So the dreaming mind as a traveler was also one very important notion, particularly in Native American cultures. Here is a concrete example of Lakota. So the summary of belief goes something like this. So part of the soul leaves the body again, right? When one transitions into the dream world, the free soul travels to other dimensions. So we often hear that the sleep is a little cousin of death, and this is exactly what the ancient civilizations had in mind, right? And then again, another example of the Native American Lakota again. Again, this is the one of the interesting aspects. They say you have to look deeper, way below the anger, the hurt, the hate, the jealousy, the self-pity, way down deeper where the dreams lie, son. Find your dreams. It's pursuit of the dream that heals you. So the healing purposes of dreams were taken very, very seriously. And we will see later on then this kind of notion continued with Hippocrates as well. The dreaming, as mentioned earlier, also was a source of knowledge and exchange of knowledge and creativity. We have many examples from the anthropology on that part. So cultural tool for knowledge acquisition was one part, and we have quite good recordings on how this knowledge was transmission through different rituals. Again, in Native American cultures, functions of dreams, healing, spiritual contact, visions, insights. Again, probably one of those residues was that is still, let's say, active today when we say, let me sleep on this, let me process this, let me sleep on something. And what we are basically saying is the connotation that we enter into state of clarity when we are not only well rested, but also if it happened that we have a revelatory dreams. So the cultivating awareness of the dreaming self was very much present. And again, now we have another example from the other part of the world. So Ayurveda, again, we have the mind, which is not confused by flame or bile, but is pure and peaceful. It sees the truth only when we are well rested and we have dreams. So now I will move to ancient Greece, because this will eventually bring us to the modern science and the main, let's say, the schism between the ancient knowledge and what we are facing today, since, let's say, the Cartesian paradigm. So in ancient Greece, and I will read this for you because I think it's the most important part that kind of bridges the gap between the two paradigms. So a state of Oneiros, god of dreams, appropriately stood in the sanctuary of Asclepius, god of healing. Dreams were used to restore physical and mental health at centers such as Epidaurus. Each shrine had healerses who guided pilgrims and interpreted their dreams. They could check on the geniuses and the patient's dreams by watching their own, since an important dream would occur to both patient and priest at the same night, a coincidence called symptoma. And this is something that kind of struck me while I was doing my research on this. And that's why I also attached this a well-known symbol of medicine and healing, but originally it belonged to Asclepius. So dream oracles, for example, were common in ancient Greece. The practice of co-sleeping as well was regarded as an integral component. And similarly to Egyptian civilization, dream interpretation in ancient Greece was considered one of the essential skills. So Aristotle viewed dreams as the accumulation of sensory impressions gathered during wakefulness, and this kind of later brought us to a slightly different conceptualization of dreams. So we started to use different, let's say, tools, conceptual tools to understand what dreams are and not, although I need to, as a side note, kind of say that there is no common consensus still what dreams are or not, really depends on the school of thought. If you're asking your scientists, they will tell you, oh, it's just neural firings, and some still claim that this is a random neural firings. They have their dreams, they cannot exhibit any patterns. And then, of course, on the other side, you would have people from philosophy, anthropologists, and so on who say, no. Dreams have much deeper connection with mythology and religion than we think they do. So now the Hippocratic perspective of dreams, why am I mentioning this here is because this is the first shift from the divine mystical to the body-mind interpretation, and Hippocrates, at least in his books, we can clearly see that the body-mind, the body-soul interaction was central to health, and dreams, again, were part of this broader understanding of what's going on with our health, not only physical health, but also mental health. So dreams, according to the writings from this era, dreams are psychosomatic indicators of disease. So precognitive dreams may signal illness before symptoms appear, and the psychosomatic nature of dreams and their use was considered a diagnostic tools. So I can really go on and on with concrete examples of Hippocrates, or let's say Hippocratic writings, because sometimes it's really hard to attribute this concretely to Hippocrates. Maybe it was also his students and so on, but clearly we find examples of particular dreams that are related to particular diseases. But if I need to generalize, if we take like the birds down approach, we say we can then conclude this part by saying with this quote, but when the body is at rest, the soul being set in motion and awake administers her own household, and of herself performs all the acts of the body. So again, dreams were considered, the dreams were taken very seriously. Now, why we dream? If we move now to the present as much as we can, why we dream? This is still a central scientific mystery to all of us, even those who have been in this field for quite a while. We know for sure that dreams occur in the altered state of consciousness. That is let's say the first general observation, that the contrast with waking life is to some extent visible, but the other part is also true, that the dreams to some extent quite accurately reflect our waking concerns. Now, from my personal perspective and the motivation why dreams, to me, there are some sort of confessions from the unconscious. And as a researcher, I find them much more intriguing, although they're much more messy, much more intriguing comparing to waking life data. So with the waking life data, and we can scrap the data from the internet, and we have these cultural ideals with, let's say, inflated versions of ourselves that we usually post on social media. That's, let's say, the tip of the iceberg, but I'm kind of more curious what's going on, what's happening in this, let's say, raw unconscious expression, which dreams are part of. So I would take them as a postcard from the unconscious, not only individual conscious, unconscious, but also collective. So they represent a stratum, let's say, stratum of psychic existence, right? And semantically, of course, they are complex. But at the same time, this is the fraction that we get from the unconscious, at least to our understanding, and it's kind of enough for us to treat it as a valuable and very fragile data. Now, in our research, particularly, I will focus on two projects that I've been working on. I was working on in the past years. I've been mostly dealing with textual data of dreams, but I will also quickly discuss about the VR implications. But now, as mentioned earlier, like the modern science shifted our perception of dreams. The strictly body-mind split would be one of the causes, although there are always cumulative effects of why we understand dreams today as we do, but the reductionism, the scientific reductionism would be the other one. So the dreams are kind of dirty, to work with. You cannot, if I need to illustrate, you cannot put dreams into Petri dish. So they're only measurable phenomenon considered legitimate, and dreams are super elusive and avoid narrative frameworks in many cases. So they're really messy to work with. And if you read them, I wouldn't even recommend reading long dream diaries more than 1 hour per day, because it can really, there are some serious side effects also for the researchers. So you need to be careful with dosing yourself with that kind of data. So waking consciousness, again, is no wonder that it's more privileged, and dreams often are seen as meaningless or even pathological, right? From the Freudian perspective, dreams have been mostly considered as, okay, from the pathological point of view, but we also know that dreams can be numinous. We also have good dreams and really inciting dreams and inspiring dreams, and those are not subject to science because they're just not problematic, right? So, but now we are also luckily seeing softening of those boundaries, and also Jung did a lot of that work and kind of was bold enough to expand it right? To expand the notion and understanding of dreams, let's say not only interdisciplinary, but also transdisciplinary. I will skip the dreams from the processual, from the part of the process, because this is not really what kind of drives my interest. So, and we'll mostly focus on dreams from the content perspective. So to conclude this part, now dreams, we know that in pre-modern era, they were internal guides, and now they are being externalized, interpreted through empirical methods. So beyond the spatial temporal coordinates, what exactly are we dealing with here? You know, first of all, we know that dreams, at least theoretically, we know that there are typical patterns in dreams. So here is a quick example of 25 of most, let's say, frequently reported dream motives. And then how do we start proving also scientifically with rigorous, let's say, empirical method to kind of convince the hard sciences also that dreams should be taken more seriously? And we know from mythology and we know from pioneering research before that we have these universal figures. We also are quite aware that there are universal patterns in dreams. As mentioned earlier, a lot of research has been done on this part before, but it was mostly qualitative research. Now we have this cultural shift when we see our data being digitized, and we also have the opportunity to see dreams on a large scale. Now, what we are seeing now is, for example, from close reading also, that dreams content show shift from biblical and divine entities toward modern cinematic references. Here I'm specifically referring to large databases of dreams, and we can see that, let's say, the so-called neo-deities, when people don't dream about, let's say, religious figures anymore, but they dreams about Superman and other, let's say, pop cultural references. This is I will now quickly show you what modern computational language, large language models tools can do, and this was one research before the advent of the LLM. At that time, we were already able to put the dreams into, let's say, a virtual three-dimensional space and see what's going on. So, for example, these are flight and fight dreams, and we could cluster them and we could see what's going on the semantic level. So not only we were interested in frequencies, but also we were interested in what happens in flying dreams. If I fly in my dreams, if I'm escaping someone, who am I escaping from, and what am I, or who am I escaping to? And in a nutshell, this was a mother figure appeared from that data to be a very ambiguous figure. So most of the dreamers was escaping from their mother or fighting their mothers, but then also escaping back to their mother. So this is a very interesting paradox of the mother. Now, another question that kind of is at the point of my current interest is what happens if we start working on something larger than that, because the current large language models actually allow us to do that. So the idea of the Dream Atlas is now kind of in its demo phase, but what we are trying to do is collect the literature of 60, 70,000 bibliographical units and combine it with dream reports and see how that functions and what kind of archetypes are we able to trace. So we are interested in worldwide religions, marginal as well, and basically we would like to cover the entire world and see how different schools of thought would interpret various dreams and archetypes. And I will now conclude with the last 2-3 minutes. And since Gorazd was already talking about virtual reality, I will just quickly touch on the part where at one of the experiments that we did in 2018 at the UCLA School of Theater, Film and Television was that we wanted to transfer one of the dreams into virtual reality to see what is going on, and if we can experience that dream as if was my own dream. So we wanted to play with the notion of qualia, to be honest, to see if this is something that can be, let's say, refabricated. And the most frightening part, which also And here is a quick protocol of the experiment that I can share with you guys later if you're interested, but I would probably focus here more on the epistemological part of this experiment, which was that once I was able to re-enter my own dream with the help of the VR and the headset, the result was that it really felt like as if I was in my dream again. And I would say the neuroplasticity, right, of the brain is also very interesting. As Gorazd was mentioning earlier, the brain doesn't need much to reconstruct the dream. So there is no high fidelity of visual elements that we need, right? We just really need a basic virtual representation of the dream, and the brain will fill out the rest. And this was basically this was something that was frightening, but at the same time also very exciting observation, but also with a lot of ethical and epistemological considerations. So again, here are the implications of such VR, let's say, treatment of dream content, since we now know that we can re-experience our dreams with quite fair, with good enough quality, and the qualia is, let's say, is there. So what does it mean for also the therapist and the other, let's say, aspects of the well-being industry that Gorazd was mentioning earlier? So now we're bridging the gap basically between dreams that can be shared in the common VR space. We also can replay the most problematic part of the repeating the dreams and the nightmares. So we can manipulate the dream. We can basically reenact the dream. And the most interesting part, and again frightening part, is that we can invite someone else into our own dream, and that example would be the hopefully well-trained therapist that would help us to manipulate the reoccurring dream to the extent that the dream stops recurring. And this is because this is the nightmare of the nightmares. They keep on coming, and they are in the loop, right? This is the repetitive pattern of nightmares is what frightens us most more than the content of the nightmare. And this is something where the VR can really help. So here is a more detailed list of implications, and now I will now conclude with the dreams in the Anthropocene and what has changed and what not, and why do we need the past knowledge and the ancient knowledge to really understand what's going on in the current era that we are fortunate or not fortunate enough to live in. So the LLMs, the advantages, we have discussed them already with other colleagues did an amazing job here. We know that diagnostic value is getting better and better, but also we know that we are now dependent on algorithms, and that we're often also as researchers seduced by automated responses, right? So there is those tools allow us don't allow us much room for cultivating doubt and critical distance, the much needed critical distance. And probably one of the most interesting, I would say, or concerning facts is that the commercialization of such tools and, of course, the gamification aspect of these tools, particularly in the VR part of the industry. So the future research will map and simulate dream content for sure. If it's not happening already, it will happen tomorrow. Imagery dominates dream perception, so it will become part of that visual part of understanding of who we are, and the VR platform are designed to collect dream data for scientific, experimental, and other uses. And of course, they still have the great potential for psychotherapy, but the question is really like who owns such platforms and what is the motive and the intent behind those platforms, which was one of the reasons why a few years ago kind of backed off from that part of the research, because it was just, let's say, risky to the extent to be the part of this wagon that might end up differently than you imagined. So we also are dealing with the complete loss of physical presence, but then again, it really depends on the intent, who's sponsoring and who is funding such platforms and so on. So now I will just conclude with a few epistemological considerations. Now we know that digital disruption of dreaming and inner life is on its way, and we also experience ourselves disrupted sleep patterns and so on, which of course has a big effect on our let's say dreamscapes and dreaming selves. So we are losing our access to inner life through systematic externalization of dreams, but also through digital medium. And fragmented attention reflects a shift of modes of being. So this is the slow and fragile labor of making sense is now being ruptured, for sure, if I quote our colleague Victor Krebs here. And as a last part, I would say epistemological consideration is thinking and dreaming with the machines. It's something that we need to consider. It's something that we cannot shy away from. There is currently a big research gap between ancient knowledge, wisdom, religious traditions, and AI. And it is pertinent to talk also about the digital dark age, because what we are seeing currently is that we are losing a lot of dream reports from the Middle Ages, from, let's say, 13th, 12th century, 15th century. Nothing has been digitized to the extent that would make a research rigid, scientifically rigid enough. So, and what we are seeing is that LLMs are kind of filling these gaps, but in a very one-dimensional way. Again, we're losing context, and that's the most, I would say, concerning, the most frightening part. So rather than inquiring into this very popular question of potential for machine sentience or consciousness, I would suggest that the more pressing question is how the integration of machine technologies and algorithmic logic has already altered our consciousness and also our way of thinking as researchers, scientists, and scholars, and our own cognitive processes. So I will conclude with that, and thank you very much.
Very fascinating, muito fascinante. Está funcionando, gente? Agora sim, né? Alô? Não, agora ele diminuiu, depois você regula, por favor. Eu vou gritar um pouquinho, tá? Porque você não mundo está atendendo bem. Bom, agradeço a Maia com a apresentação. Nós colecionamos muitos dados, muitas informações. Eu não vou fazer pergunta nenhuma neste momento, dando espaço para vocês, aproveitando o restinho que nós temos de tempo, para 1, 2, 3 perguntas, talvez fazendo as 3 perguntas, direcionando a pergunta à pessoa que poderia responder a questão, e depois a gente dá a palavra para os palestrantes respondendo, tá bom? Então, quem gostaria de começar? Verônica, Vitória, por favor. So we are now entering the session of questions. We will collect 2 or 3 questions and then you will answer.
Muito obrigada. Thank you very much. Professor Jorge, if it is not a problem for you, can I just make all the questions in English? Sadly, in this session, you are the only Brazilian. So this is interesting as well. I wanted to thank you all for the very illuminating papers. I was learning a lot. I would like to first make a question to Professor Norin. Professor Norin, when you recall them, there is, of course, this issue and a very dangerous, simple answer when we address AI as an other. I wanted to ask you if probably the danger is that most people, they want to think of AI not as another, but as a human being. Mm-hmm. And probably when we think about AI as an other, probably it is something that we still have to discover, but it is an otherness which is not human and cannot be thought or treated as a human. And I think that probably all these very I will say this topic, situations that we have seen, people getting in love with AI, people creating romantic or even erotic relationships, in quotation marks, with AI, is because they are hoping to get some sort of human feedback, which is, of course, quite impossible or completely impossible, and it is more like an illusion of their own needs projected into something that they think it is another human. This is the first question, and I also wanted to make a question to Professor Rafael Shoji. I was very happy when you mentioned animism. I am currently working also with the notion of digital animism, not as perceiving these digital virtual platforms as they have soul, but in a more new animistic point of view, that we get some sort of dialogue, right? There is something occurring there, and they are not simple, like artificial playing machines, but we are actually relating with them and we are constructing experiences with them. So I just wanted to know your opinion on that. And Gora Stagmaya, probably we can then share our reflections. We will have plenty of time. I wanted to thank you also for your illuminating papers. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Temos mais espaço para outras questões? Alguém? Não. Então vamos pedir primeiro as respostas. Você quer? Por favor, microfone.
You speak in English. Is a comment for you. Some religions, they are being studied by neuroscience, and they are being studied by mediumship. If you study mediumship, they are studying dreams. Because in some religions, you construct the mediumship by dreams. Without dreams, you are nothing. And the neuroscience in France is doing this very heavily. I was contacted by 2 neuroscientists to talk about trance, possession, incorporation, whatever. And I think the neuroscientists are trying to make this arrangement. There is a here in São Paulo, there is a person who is studying mediumship too. The activity of mediumship. I think it was in psychology, I'm not sure. And there is another scientist in north of Brazil studying too mediumship. I think not dream directly, but...
So you're referring to mediums, right? The ones that
yeah. But if you study mediumship, you have to study dream. Yeah. I don't know if you know this information.
No, I don't. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with Fornoy, which was the mentor of me. And, they were studying mediumships at that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
It was a thin line.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One more question, maybe. Gabriel?
Maybe.
Yes.
For Mr. Goras over there. I'd like to know if I got it correctly from your presentation. There's a possibility of application of those methods to maybe therapy or medical care or something like that in order to... Oh, okay. So when you're... And mainly because you pointed out that people were studying meditation in these virtual reality environments, right? So which is the therapeutic, let's say, application for this? And if you know where if there's some consistent interest in markets around that subject.
Ok, eu acho que temos questões suficientes para pequeno debate. So I think we stop here with the questions, so we can start with the answers. I think, Noreen, maybe you start with your answer.
Okay, thank you, Victoria, for your question. In a way, I think you put your finger on one of the difficulties that we have with AI. And that is that we want it to be both human and an other. In other words, in a simple way, we want it to be a tool, but we also want it to be a partner or a companion. We want human responses from it that affirm us, but we don't want demands from it the way another human would make upon us. So we're confused. Sometimes we want to treat it as a tool. We could turn it on or off as we like. Other times we want to treat it as another human. And the thing is, you can't have both at the same time. In other words, if we think of the human analogy, a person cannot be treated as a tool and a partner at the same time. If they're a tool, they're a slave. If they're a partner, they are free, which means, of course, that they are free to deny us. But we want AI, in a sense, to be both of those things. On a societal level, I think we want it to be an other. On the larger level, I listen to what the tech bros are saying in Silicon Valley, and I see them essentially positing that AI is going to solve problems that we humans could not solve. In some sense, of course, as a tool, it can, because it can process faster, it can process more data than we can. But we are starting to think of it in more godlike terms. And in that sense, we are looking for an other. And this, I think, is not odd, because I think that human beings, as you saw from my quotes towards the end, are built to be self-transcendent, and therefore to look for a transcendent consciousness to match us. As we live in a culture that increasingly does not believe in God, we feel lonely being the only intelligent things in the universe. So we look for something else, some other intelligence, whether it's scanning the heavens for ET, for extraterrestrial intelligence, whether it's trying to talk to animals, or whether it's trying to build an intelligence in AI. We are looking for something beyond ourselves. So in a way, yes, we anthropomorphize the computer. We want it to give us things we would normally get from other humans, but we also want it to be more than that.
Thank you very much, Professor.
I think the sequence is now that Raphael gives his answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. Well, yeah, that's the way to analyze conceptually the phenomenon, I think. I think the society needs our contribution in this direction. People need this contribution because they idolize or they treat like anima, like souls. But I would say that it will be worse in the future because we will have robots, right? So it's not an immersive experience, but also some physical appearance of humans and other creatures. But also I would say that there's economy behind it. And that's a very important thing, because in the original animes, we don't have this economic interest clearly, right? But now we have not only an attention economy, but also this imagination economy. It's good to imagine it, AI as a god, because it will solve problems. It will be good to imagine it as a soul, because we will interact with them. So it is a loop inside this economic system also.
To repeat your comment on the comment of this question of trance and dreams and the function of epistemological function of study of mediums. So I think most people didn't hear what you said. That's why.
Oh, okay. So thank you for bringing that up. And it is so. There is a thin line, if we can even discuss thin line, between altered state of consciousness and dreams. And also, for example, recently I was searching for medieval dreams and ancient dreams, also with the help of artificial intelligence, such as Gemini and so on. And comparing, of course, with this traditional research method. And what I was observing is that dreams were not only dreams, they were also visions and daily hallucinations and so on. And that's what mediums were about. And as we know that until 1920, mediums were widely studied in Europe. That's why I referred to Flournoy, because Flournoy was at that time still working with, her name was Helen Smith, and she was well known at that time for being able to hold different personalities. I personally went that far to go to Geneva and study the handwriting, because she would also not only change personalities, but she would also change handwritings. Of course, now in modern psychology or psychotherapy treatment would say that it probably is a personality disorder, but at that time it was considered, with many other domains, it was considered as a added value, basically, because that's how mediums were always perceived. And if I go back to dreams, to some extent they are now artificially reduced to nocturnal events, and for the sake of scientific clarity, we study them as nocturnal events. But if, of course, we want to expand the research further, then we should be dealing with other, let's say, altered state of consciousness. And daydreaming was definitely, and hallucinating and everything has always been a part of that, right? So the mediums are a separate topic that I have a passion about, but it's a matter of time and everything else. But would be lovely to talk to you about this, really. Thank you. Yep, sure.
Okay, there's one more question. Please, would you answer
it's working?
this question?
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you for your question, Gabriel. Short answer is, I don't know. But I mean, there is more to say slightly speculatively, because how this kind of treatment is done or offered is by you come there and you're just exposed to this environment in this kind of passive way, calming way. So the idea is, I don't think that there is any technique with some kind of, mantras or something else involved. It's rather, I think, just to kind of mindfully listen to the sounds, see the visuals, maybe look around and so on with the VR set. And the idea is that it would calm your nerves down, the system calms down, and your mind becomes, more sort of flowy and stuff like that. But I don't know whether there are any actually techniques involved beyond that. But this is also what you can already see in this kind of little online offer that you can have on YouTube and other places. You can go in there, and then, the invitation is like what used to be like 10 years ago or so, started with like a slow TV movement in Norway. There were these long television shows that was nothing but like train went from Oslo to Bergen, and then 8-hour or whatever slow train, and then they put many cameras on, and it goes through these Norwegian valleys and nature, and people watch that, and it was the most watched show in the history of Norwegian television. After it, yes, it's like and Norwegians took it as like, this is our culture, this is what we do, we just enjoy our nature. And then if you cannot go out there, you are like watching it on television, and so in a way, it was a counterculture to fast-paced, attention-grabbing, limited attention span inducing culture, but still through digital media, through visual digital representation at the time. And this, I think, it's then now expanded, that kind of idea, into therapeutic well-being industry, right? That's how I see it. But That's a long speculative answer and not direct, because I have never undergone this kind of thing that I would go to a treatment center and have like a half an hour or 1 hour immersion in virtual nature. I only did it in a, you know, self-medicating style. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you very much. It was really immersive experience for me all the time. As all these wonderful talks, presentations, I learned so much. It was for me many perspectives, many questions. I would go from here thinking about it. For example, the potential that this evocative nature of this experience have for example, for teaching religions. So my experience is when you go to a place like India, for example, you really experience something. You see the same thing that you could read, but there's some dimension is missing. Maybe this would be something very interesting in the future. Yeah, and all the other, Noreen, thank you very much, Taming, to the United States for your presence and your interesting talk. These two colleagues from Estonia as well, and Rafael, of course, Slovenia, and Rafael from Brazil. Very nice. Thank you. Muito obrigado por sua presença, sua paciência. A gente passou um pouco pelo horário almoço, mas agora cheio de inspirações, né? Talvez valeria mais a pena ainda não perder o momento de criar pequenos grupos, ou para um restaurante, ou acho que a PUC não tem mais lanchonete, mas aqui ao redor tem coisas. Muito obrigado. Tem mais uma sessão hoje à tarde. Não deixa a Victoria aqui sozinha com o Gabriel. A gente precisa de material aqui humano, tá bom? Muito obrigado. Até mais.